Hello, my drunken Buddhas. This is Ben. Welcome. And today I'm going to be talking about self-love and why sort of the main strategy we try to use for self-love doesn't work and maybe what we can do instead. So this main strategy is trying to decide or will ourselves to love ourselves. Typically this happens when we're, feeling the opposite. We're feeling a bit ashamed of ourselves in some way, feel like things aren't going right. And there's this attempt, it's like, I've just got to love myself more. If I could just accept myself, that'd be so much better. I really should learn to love myself more, be more self-compassionate. And this never really works. And the reason is that we're not actually in those moments trying to love ourselves. What we're trying to do is change our experience to something we prefer. So you may have an experience of self-hatred, for example. Say you just failed at some project and you just feel the shame and the self-hatred. And you say, that's the kind of time we might be like, oh, I should love myself more. People around you might tell you, oh, just love yourself more. But what we're really trying to do there is just escape from that feeling of self-hatred and shame, like it's painful. And it's very understandable. But it just doesn't work very well because what's actually happening is you're pushing away a part of yourself. In saying that you're trying to love yourself, you're actually rejecting a part of yourself, namely this sensation of self-hatred and shame, and maybe some thoughts that exist and some beliefs you have about yourself. You're pushing those parts away in the name of self-love. And you can see the contradiction here, which is why it doesn't work. You can't just override these parts of us that feel or push them away that shame or hate ourselves. So I'd like to suggest that instead we take a kind of a counterintuitive approach, a more subtractive approach. And the key to this is to acknowledge all the parts of yourself. And I need to explain what I mean by that. So when I talk about acknowledge, I mean really starting to notice how different parts of yourself arise in your direct experience. So let's take that self-hatred example. If in a moment that you're hating yourself in some way, you'll notice that there are certain thoughts in your mind, there's certain sensations in the body. That's how it's showing up in your direct experience. Not the narrative is like, oh, well, I hate myself because this and this and this. There's actually a thought that you can watch and see in your experience. There's a sensation that you can put your attention on, like a cloud of sensation, a constellation. Maybe a few different things, some shame, some tension, but it's kind of all of a piece, right? You can feel that it's some part of you, even though it's made of these separate parts, these separate components. It's kind of this one part that you could label self-hatred. And I'm here to suggest that we're not going to get very far with self-love unless we learn to acknowledge and allow this part of us to be here. This doesn't mean necessarily wallowing in it, doesn't mean believing in it, doesn't mean acting it out. We don't have to be like, oh, I hate myself, telling everyone how bad we are. I'm just talking about noticing, acknowledging that this part of us is here. And it's from some time in the past. It would have come up to help motivate us forward in some time of our life, to protect us from being judged or criticized perhaps in the past. And so all these parts of us were trying to help us at least, and still are trying to help us in some way. It just might not be appropriate anymore. And when I say all the parts of ourselves, I'm talking about all those sensations, those feelings that we find painful and we try and resist, all the beliefs we might have about ourselves, others, some traits we might have of our personality. Myself, I've got quite a few, tendency towards arrogance, cut this bit out. The traits of our personality, whether there's, anger, arrogance, thoughtlessness, inconsiderate, lazy, all these kind of, these are just labels. I don't want to kind of, pathologize or demonize any of these, but I'm just using the words that we tend to most commonly use. It's like, and these are parts of us that we tend not to want to look at or acknowledge. And other parts of us that are just very socially unacceptable, some desires we might have, some impulses we might have, like towards violence or aggression or judgment or criticism. Again, to be absolutely clear, I'm saying by no means should you act these out or express them, but if they're there, we need to acknowledge them. If there's some part of us that just wants to blow up the world, just hates it all, it's like, don't blow up the world, but acknowledge that this part of you is here for sure. Feel the pain that's associated with that. And that is the path to self-love. It's feeling these different parts of us which we have, for various good reasons in the past, had to reject or resist. And in so doing, we slowly start to integrate these parts of us back into ourselves, and we start to feel more whole. And as we start to really feel the self-hatred, it transforms, it transmutes. It changes into its opposite. Just by simply allowing it to complete its mission of being felt, of allowing the hatred, it's satisfied, it then sort of reintegrates and dissolves. And there's no need to hate yourself in that particular way, in that particular intensity anymore. And there'll be many, many layers to these different parts. It's the work of a lifetime. But this is the real way to self-love. It's not by trying to love yourself, and actually what you're really doing is rejecting parts of yourself. It's going around acknowledging, feeling these different parts of yourselves. And as you do that over the years of welcoming these different parts, reintegrating them, there's just a natural degree of self-love that starts to arise. It's not perfect, it's not complete, it's not total, but more and more there's just a natural self-compassion. Particularly it's worth noting as you work with shame, as you start to really feel the shame that you feel at the depths of your being, which everyone has, a kind of a basic ontological guilt and shame about the fact that they exist even. So you start to really get into that. Whatever you're doing in life, there's just a lot more lightness around it and a lot more capacity to be kind to yourself and give yourself what you need in any given moment without these critical voices coming in. So it's really, self-love it's not a doing, it's not a choosing, a trying, a striving. It's a kind of a state of being that arises when we have learned to be with all the parts of ourselves, not acting them out, but letting them process and integrate, becoming more whole, sort of clear vessel. Hope that was helpful. And I will see you soon. Ah, yes, of course, if you want more information on practices and exercises to help you do this kind of thing, I have lots of somatic therapy resources on my website, a big toolkit of 115 different practices. It's free, or you can get in touch with me on my website to ask me any questions or do some one-on-one work.